بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم تنزيل الكتاب من الله العزيز الحكيم إنا أنزلنا إليك الكتاب بالحق فاعبد الله مخلصا له الدين.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with Surah Az-Zumar and verse 21 and 22 inshallah. 21 and 22 from Surah Az-Zumar at the bottom of the page here. I will recite the two verses inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ألم تر أن الله أنزل من السماء ماء فسلكه ينابيع في الأرض ثم يخرج به زرعا مختلفا ألوانه ثم يهيج فتراه مصفرا ثم يجعله حطاما إن في ذلك لذكرى لأولي الألباب أفمن شرح الله صدره للإسلام فهو على نور من ربه فويل للقاسية قلوبهم من ذكر الله أولئك في ضلال مبين. First ayah, the translation: Do you not see that Allah sends down rain from the sky and makes it flow as springs and rivers in the earth? Then He produces thereby crops of varying colors. Then they dry and you see them turn yellow. Then He makes them scattered debris. Indeed, in that is a reminder for those of understanding. So this is now the verses talks about some of the signs of Allah. There is universal, the physical signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it refers to, or the purpose of it, as you see in the context of the verses with regards to establishing the belief in the Quran, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and from the beginning of the surah that this is the book where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down for people to follow and for them to worship none but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And the example of the rain and what happens as a result of the rain to the earth is something that is repeated throughout the Quran, especially with the Quran and the hearts. So remember this example, because this is what the Quran is supposed to do to the hearts, like the water that comes from the skies to the earth. So, but here, as Imam Sa'di rahimahullah says, يذكر تعالى أولي الألباب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding أولي الألباب. And in the end of the verse, إن في ذلك لذكرى لأولي الألباب. And before that, few verses before, إنما يتذكر أولو الألباب. The people of reason and intellect that are reminded. So this is a reminder versus the previous verses. It talked about a dhikra as a verb, يتذكر. And of course there's differences here between both. So he says, يذكر تعالى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding the people of reason. ما أنزله من السماء من ماء. What He brought down from the heavens, from the water. وأنه سلكه ينابيع. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala سلكه. سلكه, that means make it penetrated, made it go to a path inside. ينابيع, springs, like comes from ينبوع, which comes out, the water comes out from the earth. في الأرض, in the earth. أي أودعه فيها ينبوعا. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala أودعه, He put the water in the earth that comes from the skies to be reservoirs under the earth, يستخرج بسهولة ويسر, for it to be extracted with ease. ثم يخرج به زرعا. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as you see, this is all referred to Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that brings the rain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that brings the zar'a and the plants. ثم يخرج به زرعا مختلفا ألوانه, different colors, with different colors, من بر وذرة وشعير وأرز وغير ذلك, wheat and corn, barley and rice and other than that, with all kinds of plants and means of provisions. Then ثم يهيج. Then this is the cycle of what happens to the plants. ثم يهيج, that means it reaches a state where عند استكمالها أو عند حدوث آفة فيه. That means it changes and it becomes dry. So this is يهيج, becomes dry عند استكماله, once the cycle is finished, or whenever there's an afa or something harmful happened to it. And a word haja, yahiju, gives this meaning from yabis, that means becomes dry, and also it gives the meaning of something moving very strongly. So that's something that can be said that after that happens, then it becomes in such a state. Then you would see it yellow. This is the stage where it becomes dry. ثم يجعله حطاما, then he makes it destroyed. حطاما, futat, then it breaks. متكسرا, broken. So this is the cycle of how things are on the face of earth with the plants and what comes out from the earth. And some of it is very fast in its cycle, some stays longer. And then the ayah ends with إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَذِكْرَى لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Indeed, there is a dhikra, there is a reminder here for the people of reason. And al-albab, as we talked about it before, the lub is the core of things, the core. Without the core, that thing does not exist, right? So this is the core of things. The core of the human beings is his aql. Without the aql, the human being is not a human being. What makes human being a human being, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honors the human being, is the fact that they have the ability to think and to reflect and to choose. So here he says يذكرون به أو يذكرون به. So إن في ذلك لذكرى. What's mentioned in this ayah is a reminder for the people of reason. They remember by it, by what's mentioned, عناية ربهم. The عناية is the well care of, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take care of his creation. ورحمته بعباده, and his mercy towards his ibad. حيث يسر لهم هذا الماء, since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for them this water. وخزنه بخزائن الأرض, and خزنه من الخزائن, treasures, reservoirs, saved it in the earth تبعا لمصالحهم, according to what they need. If they need it, they extract it. So the human beings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the matter easy for them, that whenever they want to use the water, they would use the water, not that is the other way around. وَيَذْكُرُونَ بِهِ كَمَالَ قُدْرَتِهِ, and also they are reminded by this, by the perfect and complete power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَنَّهُ يُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى كَمَا أَحْيَا الْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهَا. This is now the reminder that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave life to the dead as he gave life to the earth after it's dead. They see this amazing sign from Allah, something that is dead, barren land, and then life comes from it. So the same thing, why they're thinking that the matter is impossible to happen, or how can the dead be resurrected, when the matter is easy, they see it every day in their life. وَيَذْكُرُونَ بِهِ, also that they remember that أَنَّ الْفَاعِلَ هُوَ الْمُسْتَحِقُّ لِلْعِبَادَةِ, that the one that is doing this is the one that deserves to be worshipped. These idols, they don't bring the rain from the skies, they don't make the springs and reservoirs of water, they don't plant the plants. So therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that is worthy of worship. Allahumma ja'alna. Then he makes dua. The Imam al-Sa'di rahimahullah, he makes a dua because, in the ayah, before he says his dua, he says, Inna fi dhalika la dhikra. This is a reminder, right? And the reminder, not everybody benefits from it. لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ, the people of reason. So how come some people, they claim to have reason and they're smart in some things in their life, but they don't get the reminders of it? They don't remember the hereafter. They don't increase their iman. They don't worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So the matter is a very serious one. And it requires for the person to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with fear and hope and dua and to be sincere. So that's why he says, Allahumma ja'alna min ulil albab. Oh Allah makes us from ulil albab. Makes us among those who are smart and those who are intellect and they use the reason in the right way. الَّذِينَ نَوَّهْتَ بِذِكْرِهِمْ. Those who you mention them. نَوَّهْتَ. Tanweeh is when you appoint to something. So the ones that you pointed about them, you mentioned them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is praising them. وَهَدَيْتَهُمْ بِمَا أَعْطَيْتَهُمْ مِنَ الْعُقُولِ. And those who you guided them with what you gave them from al-uqul, the intellect and reason. وَأَرَيْتَهُمْ مِنْ أَسْرَارِ كِتَابِكَ. And you made them see from the secrets of your book. وَبَدِيعِ آيَاتِكَ. And the amazing ayat and signs of yours, O Allah. مَا لَمْ يَصِلْ إِلَيْهِ غَيْرُهُم. What others they did not reach. Even though they have the ability, but they didn't reach this the contemplation over the book of Allah to see the not secrets in a way that it's hidden from people, but it requires uqul. The Quran addresses the hearts, and the place of al-aql is in the heart. This Quran is revealed for people to think, not just to read it, and to have in the hearts all kinds of baggages of arrogance and things of that nature, but to reflect upon it and to read it with thinking and putting their reason and reflecting upon it and upon its signs and ayat. So those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them see, this is a great favor from Allah. So he's making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah makes us among those who see the secrets of the book and the what's hidden from the apparent meaning of things, which is all has to be, of course, based on the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. But here refers to the benefits to the hearts. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is a reminder. Are we getting the reminders? Are we being reminded? The hearts are being affected. وَإِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْوَهَابِ. Indeed, you are the bestower of things, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, and if you remember the verse that says, إِنَّمَا يَتَذَكَّرُ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ, which comes after أَمَّنْ هُوَ قَانِتٌ أَنَاءَ اللَّيْلِ سَاجِدًا وَقَائِمًا يَحْذَرُ الْآخِرَةَ وَيَرْجُو رَحْمَةَ رَبِّهِ. For those who worship Allah and devoted in worship the hours of the day and the night, they fear the hereafter and they hope for the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are the ones, the people of reason, and they are constantly being reminded, which shows in that previous verses, it talked about the religious signs of Allah, the ibadah of Allah, the worship of Allah. They worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because they're constantly doing this act of reminding themselves that makes their heart devoted to Allah. And here, inna fi dhalika la dhikra, this is as a noun, this is well established because this is, everybody sees it. Everybody sees the skies and the rain and the earth and the plants and all the different things. So, and it requires for people to reflect upon this and to be upon it. And also, as you, when you see even what's mentioned here, since the Quran is mentioned in the Quran about this example, the earth or the skies brings water by the will of Allah, like the Quran comes from the heavens, comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَسَلَكَهُ يَنَبِيعَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. The same thing the Quran supposed to go to the hearts, goes deep into the heart. Right? Not just by the tongues, not just by the throat. As the Prophet ﷺ, when he talked about the Khawarij, he said that they recite the Quran, but لا يجاوز حناجرهم. The Quran does not go beyond their hanajir. Al-hanjara is the vocal cords. It does not go beyond that. It just stays there. So the Quran is supposed to go to the hearts. So when we're reading the Quran, is it going to the heart? Is the heart being affected to feel the love of Allah? Not as a feeling, as an act of worship. The fear of Allah, the hope for the rewards from Allah, the hereafter. And then a person will be obedient to Allah. So the Quran does this. يَنَابِيعَ فِي الْأَرْضِ, in the hearts. ثُمَّ يُخْرِجُ بِهِ زَرْعًا. Then the fruits comes. Then the produce of what's in the heart. In the heart, once it's purified with the Quran, then the actions will speak. Speech and actions according to what's in the heart. Righteousness, goodness. And it's مختلفا ألوانه, all different types of colors and different types of things. Why? Because the root now and the foundation is sound. ثم يهيج فتراه مصفرا ثم يجعل حطاما. The life of the human beings. And with whether it's مختلفا ألوانه, the different types of people that get affected by the Quran, whether believers or disbelievers, then at the end, everyone, as the plants and as what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grows on the face of earth, they grow old and they die and everybody return to Allah. So the matter is a repeated one. So this is a dhikra لأولي الألباب. The next ayah is also a great ayah that we have only a few minutes and it requires for us. Tafseer is one thing and reflecting is another thing. But after knowing the tafsir, أفمن شرح الله صدره للإسلام فهو على نور من ربه, which means so is one whose best Allah has expanded to accept Islam and he is upon a light from his Lord, like one whose heart rejects it. Then woe to those whose hearts are hardened against the remembrance of Allah. Those are in manifest error. أفمن شرح الله صدره للإسلام. So as the people of taqwa were mentioned before, and after this example that one mentioned in the previous verse in the Quran, how it affects the heart here. So is the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala شرح الله صدره. شرح. Al-inshirah is something that is expanded with ease, with goodness. So he says أفيستوي من شرح الله صدره للإسلام فاتسع. His heart is spacious enough لتلقي أحكام الله, to receive the rules from Allah, والعمل بها, and to act upon it. Very spacious. That means not feeling tight with it, not feeling it's lots of burden and actions, but rather to feel the spaciousness in it. منشرحا. منشرحا gives the meaning of the ease and the tranquility and the happiness. قرير العين, comfort of the eyes. على بصيرة من أمره, with clear vision when it comes to his affairs. وهو المراد بقوله فهو على نور من ربه. He is in light from his Lord. So someone is like this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened his heart, made it spacious enough and ease with the deen of Islam, guided him to the deen of Islam, which is what fits the nature, and the entire life is upon this. And he has light from his Lord. That means he's following the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It did not continue to say, or we would ask a question, is the one like this equal to the other one? But the other one is not mentioned. Why? Because it's already obvious. So he says, كَمَنْ لَيْسَ كَذَلِكَ. Is he the same as other than that? What's the opposite? الْقَاسِيَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ. The opposite of شرح الله صدره is قسوة القلب, is the hardness of the heart. فَوَيْلٌ. Woe, punishment, warning, severe warning. لِلْقَاسِيَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ مِنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. From those who their hearts are قاسية, hardened, from away from the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أي لا تلين لكتابه. These hearts are not softened by the book of Allah. If the hearts are not softened by the book of Allah, which is the highest level of dhikr, then they are in great danger. They are warned. Like the earth or the piece of land where it's hard, rocks that does not take the water, as the previous verse talked about the rain. So a barren land. And as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that talked about the different types of people when it comes to receiving the book of Allah, is like the different types of earth. Some of it is very rough, does not take the water, does not even keep it, right? It just wastes the water that comes. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the hearts and created the human beings in such a way that they're supposed to be affected by the words of Allah, the dhikr of Allah. And if they don't, they are severely warned. That means they did something evil to prevent themselves from being affected by the book of Allah, the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most just. أي لا تلينوا لكتابه ولا تتذكروا آياته. Does not get reminded by the ayat of Allah. ولا تطمئنوا بذكره. Does not find the tranquility in the remembrance of Allah. بل هي معرضة عن ربها. Rather it's turning away from its Lord. ملتفتة إلى غيره. معرضة, turned away from Allah. Multafita, turn to someone else other than Allah. This is how human beings are. There's no such a thing as someone turning away from, unless he turns away to. From to. Turning away from Allah to Iblis, to shaitan, to oneself, to desires, to whatever. Turning away from anything, you turn to something else. And that's how evil it is. فَهَؤُلَاءِ لَهُمُ الْوَيْلُ, or turning away from the Quran. And this is also evil. When a believer, when Muslims, when we turn away from the Quran, learning and teaching and understanding and so on, to what? Turning away from the Quran, seeking guidance from where? From philosophers, from great thinkers, from our own selves and our own understanding of things, from our limited experience on the face of earth. This is evil. So the command here is, and this is how the Sahaba radiallahu anhum did. They took the Quran seriously. رسائل من ربهم, messages from the Lord. So فهؤلاء لهم الويل الشديد, those who their hearts are hardened as a result of turning away from the dhikr of Allah, from the deen of Islam, from the light from Allah. There is al-wayl al-shadid, the intense punishment for them was sharr al-kabir, the major evil. أولئك في ضلال مبين, they are in clear deviation. He says, وَأَيُّ ضَلَالٍ أَعْظَمُ مِنْ ضَلَالِ مَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ وَلِيِّهِ. What is a bigger deviation? Greater than the deviation of someone turned away from his wali, from his supporter, from his helper, from the one that is al-wadud, subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one that is the most loving, the most merciful, subhanahu wa ta'ala, turning away from the creator to turn to a creation of Allah. And of course, this is all levels of evil. The worst of it, when they would turn to the idols and these that they worship besides Allah, creation of Allah, images that they made their own selves, or someone going to a grave to make dua to that person in the grave. What bigger deviation than this? That's the worst deviation ever. Turning away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to something that is nonsense. وَمَنْ كُلُّ السَّعَادَةِ فِي الْإِقْبَالِ عَلَيْهِ. How can someone turn away from the one that all of the happiness is in turning to him and turning to him with devotion? وَقَسَ قَلْبُهُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ, and his heart become hardened from the remembrance of Allah. وَأَقْبَلَ عَلَى كُلِّ مَا يَضُرُّ, and he would come forward then to everything that is harmful for him. And that's why it's either or. This is how much a person turns this way, then he's affected the other way. How much a person turning away from the Quran, he will be affected negatively by other than the Quran, which is harmful to him. And that's why qaswatul qalbi levels. And it's a disease in the heart, right? And if a person ruined his heart till it reached that state of being hard, then he has to be patient with his heart, with his own self, till it softens again. And how to be patient with oneself? The Quran. By removing this wahsha, or this boycotting of the Quran, if it's correct to say, when it comes to the heart. Instead of watching and scrolling and looking of how the human beings are saying, putting the fear of the human beings in the hearts, and listening to this analysis and all of this, turn away from this and turn to the Quran, to the book of Allah. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. So that means it's duty, it's physical actions that needs to be observed as a result of these ayat, and not just some beautiful words are to be mentioned. And this is how the effect of the Quran comes in the heart. And you see, if you look at the ayah, أَفَمَنْ شَرَحَ اللَّهُ صَدْرَهُ لِلْإِسْلَامِ, انشراح الصدر, the spaciousness in one's heart. When a person feels tight inside, doesn't have to be a physical feeling, or he might think that he's feeling tranquility but with evil. That's even worse. So that's why it's not أَفَمَنْ شَرَحَ اللَّهُ صَدْرَهُ and that's it. It did not say is the one that Allah expanded or made his heart and his chest in state of ease with spaciousness in the absolute sense. No, لِلْإِسْلَامِ. شَرَحَ صَدْرَهُ لِلْإِسْلَامِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made his heart spacious for the deen of Islam. That means some people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made their hearts tight for Islam. When the deen of Islam, which is the most perfect thing ever, is presented to them, they feel it's tight for them. It's regulations, this is haram, this is halal, and so on. That means this person, his heart is what? Qasiyah. Qasi al-qalb. He's the furthest person away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why also أَفَمَنْ شَرَحَ اللَّهُ صَدْرًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that expands and makes the spaciousness in the heart for the deen of Islam. So Tawheed of Allah is to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with devotion, with being in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahumma shrah sadri al-Islam. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make my heart spacious enough for the deen of Islam. With the light of from His Lord, by the wahy revelation from Allah. And the effect of the wahy, how the previous verse talks about this. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy. When a person reads this first part of the verse, he says, it's such a beautiful thing. How can we have this in our hearts? One of the ways to make it easy is when you know that it's haram to do the opposite. As many of us, if it's haram, we'll stay away, right? But if it's recommended, then maybe not that important, right? Which is a wrong understanding, of course. But when a person reads that فَوَيْلٌ لِلْقَاسِيَةِ قُلُوبُهُم مِّن ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ, it's haram to allow yourself for your heart to be hard. So that means what? You have to run from the haram by applying what's mentioned before. And that's afterward, the verse also will talk about what brings this leniency and purification of the heart and so on. Allahu nazzala ahsan al-hadith. The next verse. But we'll do that inshallah ta'ala next time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought the best to the speech. And that's the best of the dhikr. But again, the question is, how is that going to happen? When it's going to happen? This is not in our capacity. أَفَمَنْ شَرَحَ اللَّهُ صَدْرًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that does this. The same thing with the plants as the previous verse. You put the seed, you water the seed, right? And then you wait. It's not you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that brings all these matters of goodness. So when we do what are we commanded to do in the limits that we have, and you read Quran daily, you understand the Quran, you reflect upon the Quran with the truthfulness that you want to apply it, and you make tafweed, you refer the matter, leave the matter to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then wait and see. That means it's going to happen by the will of Allah. So it's not necessarily that you would know exactly this is what leads, but it's by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the tawheed of Allah. So al-qasiyati qulubuhum, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from having our hearts hardened from the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help and to implement the deen of Allah. And the more the person implemented, the more the person's heart will be then spacious enough for this. And as Musa alayhi salam, when he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُوا قَوْلِي رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي. Oh Allah, make my heart spacious enough for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the word sharh is when they cut the meat, right? When they get into basically is what they use in anatomy, or dissecting something, right? So فَمَنْ شَرَحَ اللَّهُ صَدْرَهُ لِلْإِسْلَامِ, opening the heart, opening the chest like this, so that it becomes at matters of ease. ويضيق صدري ولا ينطلق لساني. So فما يريد الله أن يضله يجعل صدره ضيقا حرجا. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to as the ayah starts, فما يريد الله أن يهديه يشرح صدره الإسلام. Whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to guide him, He will يشرح صدره للإسلام. He would make his heart spacious with the deen of Islam, expanded, no tightness. وما يريد أن يضله, and whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to deviate him by the justice of Allah, يجعل صدره ضيقا حرجا كأنما يصعد في السماء. He would make his heart ضيقا, tight, حرجا, very difficult, very tight, very unease. كأنما يصعد في السماء, as if he is being pulled out to the heavens, to the skies. When physically, when someone goes up high in the skies and the pressure is tight, person is not able to breathe. So this is how the qabul, this is how one of the conditions of La ilaha illallah is to accept it, to be at ease with it, to be pleased with it. And this is all by the favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the opposite of it is al-qaswa and al-ghilza, al-salaba, the difficulty, the harshness. فهي كالحجارة, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about the people of Bani Israel, that their hearts is like stones, or even harder than the stones. The mawa'idh, the admonitions does not benefit. The ayat of Allah does not benefit whatsoever. All of that is a punishment. It's not anything but punishment from Allah. Someone is punished in this world by having their hearts hardened. They don't listen to the admonitions of the Quran. Why? They turned away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished them, reach them in a state where وَإِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَحْدَهُ اشْمَأَزَّتْ قُلُوبُ الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْآخِرَةِ. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that whenever they would hear the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, they would اشْمَأَزَّتْ, they would feel disgusted. You know, someone would say, how can someone be like this? Punishment from Allah. They did it to their own selves. So they hated so much the truth till it made them reach in such a state. And as for the believers, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَتَطْمَئِنُّ قُلُوبُهُمْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us this reality and make us among those who their hearts are softened by the book of Allah, and to make us have this iqbal to come forward and to be devoted to learn the deen of Allah and to be upon the Quran and to stay away from these fitan and these things that distracts the heart away from the dhikr and the remembrance of Allah. We'll stop here, inshallah. You know, it took a long time here. If you have any questions, please go ahead, inshallah. The attendance code is لا ذكرى لأولي الألباب. لا ذكرى لأولي الألباب. What's the difference between dhikra and dhikr? Dhikra is the reminder itself, is the noun of the reminder. وذكر فإن الذكرى, the reminder in the absolute sense. Dhikr is remembrance. Anything that is being mentioned is considered to be dhikr. So, but dhikra is more of a reminder, more specific to the reminder. طيب بارك الله فيكم. Continue inshallah ta'ala next time. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.